What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. And this one, I'm going to be giving you 12 little tips to recreating games in Minecraft, or I guess other games, or whatever, something like that. So, I guess the first thing I will point out before we even start is you may notice this build is not mine if you are familiar with my builds and stuff. I do want to give a shout out before we start to Life and Foundation for allowing me to showcase his maps as well for this, because I feel like it is better to have another kind of thing to work off of rather than just my own building. Because, yeah, he is a very good builder, and, yeah, as you can see, he has made Poppy Playtime as well, which will be nice for even comparing certain things along with, or within these categories, I guess. So, yeah, let's get right on to the first one. So the first thing I want to talk about is perspective, and as you can see, this would be my Little Nightmares 2 map, which I have made. And so this game is a perspective where you're looking from the front and looking back at the map. So essentially, how do you want to, I guess, make the perspective in game? A lot of the times it will just be a regular first-person perspective, but if you have a game like this, or Hollow Knight, or even a Mario game or something where it's either more 2D or from a different perspective that is not first-person, how do you want to kind of recreate that? For me here, it was really just, you know, making sure I have the general path, and essentially for the front, you're going to have to kind of guess. You could either make this go further, or you could just black it all off like I have. Or you will see later in the game, which I'm not going to show the whole thing, because, yeah, there will be other parts shown later. Just kind of adding a wall there, or even, you know, doing whatever you kind of want with this front, along with what you can't see within that perspective. Because, for example, you know, the camera's kind of lower, so you won't be able to see the treetops, so, yeah, I kind of just made these, onion-looking trees. Not because they're good, but just because that was my, incapability of making trees on display. But, yeah, just kind of, how do you want to go about that, and for things like this, just kind of, what do you want to assume, and what do you want to actually take? You can't obviously make it perfect for reasons like that, because not everything you can see necessarily, so it is kind of helpful to just consider that particularly. The next thing I want to talk about is scaling, and this is my Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach map, and I feel like this will be the perfect one to show off. And mainly, I want to focus on the doors. Now, obviously different games are different sizes, and generally I like to look at the character and just look at a door and be like, okay, how much taller is this door than the character? Is it, you know, a lot taller, or is it similar size? And I like the 2x3 doors a lot. You'll see them in Poppy Playtime and maybe Indigo Park, I don't remember. I don't actually know if there are any normal doors in Indigo Park now that no, there is. I guess I made those 2x2s. But just, would you rather go for the wall doors as I do the 2x3s, or would you rather go with something a little bit smaller? The bigger builds definitely look better in my personal opinion for something like this, but you do just want to make sure you keep that consistent. The next thing I will talk about, which is the third one, is planning. Now, planning really, this is my Finding Frankie before I actually say anything else. Planning is really only important to make sure you don't build your walls too early in a room, and just make sure that you have the sizing right. So for something like this, I'm going to essentially mark out this side first, right? I'm going to make all this and just see where these things should roughly be, these little things you bounce over and go under and stuff, and just kind of roughly space them out. And I don't want to make this whole floor yet, I just want to get these marked down and where they're going to be. And as I go about that, I'll, you know, make sure I get the sizing right, and then I'll work on the trampoline little sections here and just see if they work properly with the scaling, and just kind of go from there. You essentially want to focus on one element at a time and make sure you have enough room to make that element, rather than being like, yeah, this room looks like it's 50 blocks long. Eventually, you will definitely get the hang of that more, but another thing that I really like to do, especially on Hello Neighbor and stuff, is I'll take a door and I'll be like, okay, yeah, that's my door right there. I'm going to say this wall is about, whatever, 6 doors wide, which would include this other door. And so, you know, you'll get a fairly good representation there. Again, as you build more, you'll definitely get better at that. Like, for a map like this, it's definitely going to be more me kind of just looking at a wall and being like, yeah, it's about 8 blocks wide, rather than me using some sort of particular measurement. But because that is because I have built so many things so many times. So I kind of just know the way around with that. And yeah, that is definitely an acquired skill for sure, but something you will definitely notice as you get further along. In LN2, I really, by the end of it, I didn't really have to do much more than be like, yeah, that wall's about 14 blocks long. And you'll kind of make it and be like, okay, maybe that's a little bit off, so you'll end up adding maybe a couple extra blocks. It's not really about being perfect all the time, it's just about getting it as close as you can, and making sure you make everything else first, so you don't accidentally make a wall somewhere weird. The next thing that is definitely going to be helpful is just having either access to the game or being very familiar with it. For me here, I definitely would prefer to have access to the game like I'm currently doing right now, just so you can kind of, you know, go through the game and look at the walls on your own, rather than having to use a YouTube video for it. YouTube videos are absolutely helpful in most situations, but it is better to be able to go through the game on your own and just kind of get a more of a feel for every little nook and cranny. Almost every game I've ever made, I have had perfect access to, and again, I'm not going to say it's impossible without access to the game like this. Move, you stupid cabinet. But, yeah, it is definitely better for especially just being able to do this, play with your settings, have a nice video. And I always send videos through to my phone. I'll just like take a video with OBS like I guess I am right now, and then just kind of send it through to my phone so I can have it up there as I'm building. And that is generally how I build. I know I have had questions about that before, people just being like, hey, how do you actually go about building this? That's how I always have a video up of the game. Or using like the wiki images is also very helpful, especially because they sometimes have perspectives that you cannot get by just running around. This one's mine. The next thing I want to talk about is not my voice cracks, but motivation while building. This is kind of something that isn't particularly important for the project itself, but it is just nice to talk about. As you go through rooms like this, even as you're making a game, sometimes it will be like, okay, yeah, look, all these walls are the same, and the details aren't particularly very different. It's a lot of the same tables and the gurneys and stuff, and it gets repetitive quick, and sometimes it absolutely kills your motivation. I had that happen especially in Chapter 2 of this project, which I almost showed that ironically for that reason. But yeah, it is just kind of something you're going to have to live with as you build through, and I wouldn't really push yourself in an area because you don't, or because you're having problems, I guess, making progress on it, because just it's not it, you know? So kind of you can take a break absolutely whenever. Just if you push yourself, you end up making an area that doesn't look the way that you want it to, and that can in certain situations be very bad, or in certain situations it doesn't really matter, because certain rooms it is certainly fine. Like this room is very, very bare, as you can see, although I don't know if that was particularly a motivation thing. But you'll find as you get later into that that'll become more of an issue while also less of an issue at the same time. And when I say that, I really mean you're motivated to finish, yet you're also like, just get it done at the same time. And, you know, that can be good, can be bad, it just depends. But I wouldn't really work on one project or only have one project, because then you won't have particularly motivation for that one thing. That's why I like to have 2 or 3 reasonably sized ones. Like, I won't have 2 or 3 projects this big, because while I'll never finish any of them, let's be honest, just having 2 or 3 more like Poppy Playtime sized, I think, is definitely preferred. The next one I want to talk about is testing. Now, this is kind of a personal thing, more so. But, you know, sometimes you'll do things, or you'll be in the process of trying to do something, and you're like, I don't know if I like this design, or you'll play around with it. Or you'll have certain things like this to where you make something and you're like, that shouldn't probably be where it is. So you end up, you know, crunching some numbers or whatever like I have here. There's just kind of rows of blocks everywhere and stuff, as you can see, for me to lead to the conclusion of this. And really, you can do as much or as little of this as you want. This isn't particularly important if you're just trying to build casually, but sometimes it is nice to test for a design, or just for, you know, how the spacing of something should work out, rather than just going for it, because if you can mark it out and understand it a little bit more, you can definitely be more, I guess, correct with the spacing. That is something I did extremely wrong in Poppy Playtime. I have not been really testing on the areas where it loops, and it's really only been a problem for this final loop. But yeah, it is definitely better to mark it out and just kind of test different room sizes and play around with the spacing that you have. And as you can see, this all has had to have been structure blocked to the other side, because I did kind of make that mistake and forgot that connected. But yeah, just testing to make sure that this hallway does connect properly was definitely a big point in getting this actually lined up properly and getting the slides and everything to work. Next up is improvement. Changing designs through a build is not particularly a problem, and as you can see, I will show one in a moment here, but this is kind of the first design I made for these townhouses, and it looks fine, don't get me wrong, but I did later on, especially as this project went on for 3 years, I kind of discovered that this wasn't particularly the best design that you could come up with. And so later on, these townhouses were switched to a design that looks more like this, and as you can see, this one looks a lot better. You shouldn't be afraid to change your designs through a build like this. I think certain small things, like in security breach, the ATMs and stuff, I would keep the same throughout, and if you do decide to change or come up with a better design, I'd change all of them. But for something as massive as this, I don't think the changes, they're noticeable, absolutely, but I don't think they're a bad thing. It shows that you've definitely been, you know, changing your designs and just kind of are willing to try new things, at least for me. Obviously, it is a little bit of personal preference as to whether or not you would like to make all of them like this. But if you're this far into a project and you're like, you know what, that design kind of sucked, then I would say absolutely change it and make it better. And That's what I have done a lot of times. You'll see even like light designs and stuff will change. I'm not particularly consistent with those things because generally you will have them different for different scaled areas or different, I guess, sizes of things, of rooms and whatever. And so it's not horrible or not a bad thing. It just means you're adapting yourself. Next up is block choice, and this one will kind of go with the texturing one a little bit. And it's what do you kind of want to make your walls out of? There's a lot of options for each block type, and as you can see, he's got smooth, piano has smooth quartz here, white concrete here, diorite slabs here. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, it's just, what do you kind of want to use and how do you perceive that color? You don't want to necessarily always go with the obvious choice because, well, it just kind of is like, really? But yeah, just changing it up a little bit and having the colors to where they clash well is definitely something you have to think about a lot when you're making those block choices, and just kind of how it overall works with one another. And again, that will really play in the texturing, which will be the next little thing I show, and just how much contrast you want between the blocks that you choose, because sometimes you want more, sometimes you want less. It is a lot of just kind of thinking and perceiving, but yeah, definitely having not necessarily even a perfect block palette for the colors of the build is always what you want, but just something to nice hole. That probably was me, actually. Probably is just it always nice to have a little bit of contrast between your colors. The next part is texturing, and for this you either kind of want to go with a lot of texturing or almost no texturing. And as you can see, this room here is, sorry, piano, but not a lot of texture going on. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you see he's got the texturing on the floor, and that is definitely good to be separate because it's just kind of a different, I guess, level of texturing almost. But just how much do you want to texture the walls? And if you're texturing walls, you're either going to be texturing them. There's a couple different ways you can, and I'll show a couple of those examples. I don't know if he has any in this map particularly. I will have to confirm, though. But yeah, just there's a lot of ways you can go about it, and a lot of, I guess, amounts of texturing you can do. You can just a little bit. I say it, and sometimes if you've watched the Chapter 2 tutorial, I'll say a couple times, and just a light dusting, just a little bit, to kind of dirty it up. Or do you want a lot? And I will show examples of both of those now. So here's a room with a good amount of texturing. You see it goes from cyan to gray, then I guess gray wool, then gray concrete powder, and then back again. It's got like these almost stripes and kind of, not really stripes, but almost like a gradient of texturing, and it looks very nice. You can do this, or you could just do kind of basic block texturing, or the droopy that I do at the top, which I'll show both of those in my chapter 2 really quick. Ironically, I have actually both types in the game station. So as you can see, you got kind of the drooping down the walls, and this does look very good to definitely make it feel like it's kind of coming from the ceiling, but then you also do kind of wonder if you want to texture the ceiling. I generally don't, because having the two different textures like that just gets a little bit strange, but and then you see I have kind of the just kind of dotting around the edges here to make it look a little bit better. You can also do in the middle, but I didn't in this particular area because I just thought it looked better to be a little bit cleaner there. But it is absolutely up to you how you do it. There are obviously other ways you can. You will see in some areas of Chapter 2 as well, I'll have like a certain block, and then I'll essentially surround that block in more textures and just kind of work out from a central point and almost create like a circular gradient kind of, but it's not really a gradient. It's the best way I can describe it though, but yeah, just something along the lines of that. Now, the final thing I will talk about here is lighting, and hopefully I can poke fun at Piano a little bit for this one, as I did kind of help him with this in his map. But you gotta cover up those stairs, man. You gotta cover them up. There's, I think, another one, actually, that's a little bit awkward, that just ruined my whole bit. But it's fine, you get the general point. The light will come through the stairs and stuff, and it just kind of throws off everything a little bit. It might actually be on the side of the wall. I don't know. I went crazy looking for this before in his map. I'm not going to do it again. So, yeah, but yeah, you definitely got to cover those up. Adding light blocks is kind of up to you. Like, I believe, okay, I don't have a light block on me, so I'm just going to kind of do this real quick. But having a light blocks in areas is absolutely nice in certain situations. I generally don't worry about it that much, but yeah, you definitely want to have a good mix of dark and light depending on the map as well. And yeah, you see this one is fairly well lit overall. Again, just a couple of stairs and slabs that you do need to make sure you have covered, because they will absolutely ruin your lighting. And yeah, that's all. One final thing I will talk about before the outro is it is okay to use tutorials sometimes and just kind of even, well, obviously I guess I should say that because I make tutorials, but just get some either inspiration or just kind of learn certain ropes around designs and figure it out. Eventually, maybe after following, I don't know, a couple tutorials on maps like this, you can kind of make your own and stylize it your own way. Obviously, there are a lot of different ways you can go about making the same thing. So many block choices, room sizes, whatever. A lot of ways you can do it. There's no right or wrong way to go about doing it, even though you will have people in comment sections and stuff being like, that's not quite right. It is kind of up to your own interpretation how you recreate the game. Obviously, I've gone a little bit larger with Poppy Playtime in general than maybe some people would, and I went fairly large with LN2, although I don't think that was too large. But yeah, it is all your own interpretation. Every little thing you do, every block you place, every room you make, every, door you decide to make size-wise and whatever. But yeah, that is really all. Here's my playtime codex here, a little sneak peek, because I doubt that's out yet, even considering I haven't even finished it yet. This is for Chapter 1, by the way, to fit with it. And yeah, that's all. I do absolutely recommend checking out Life in Foundation. He makes some very good builds, and again, thank you to him for allowing me to use, I guess only his Poppy Playtime app is the only one I could get in here, but yeah, that's all, really. Thank you all so you guys did enjoy this video. Have a fantastic rest of your day or night, and I will see you on the next one. Peace.